Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar on behaviour design. So I'd like to welcome Jose and Naomi, who have agreed to present on this interesting and challenging subject. Look forward to sharing their insights with you all, and of course getting feedback from you guys as well, guys at the coalface. Bin stores are a challenging subject. If they're working well, nobody notices. If there's a problem, everybody notices. And one thing that we've got coming down the pipe, as most will know, is simpler recycling guidelines. So that we all know what that means, what that's going to involve for us, projects we're working on, projects that might already actually be sort of well into development. So look forward to what Jose and Naomi are going to be sharing with us today. And yes, I think, Jose, take it away. Thank you.
Right. So, okay. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. I have to say that we are thrilled to have been invited by metroSTOR to present in this webinar and to have the opportunity to share our thoughts and insights into how to design for efficient waste management in buildings. And of course, bin stores is one of the main components of waste management in buildings, but we thought it would be good to extend a little bit on that and we'll extend the presentation to cover a few other things as well. But yeah, so we are thrilled to be here, and we've prepared a presentation for you today that hopefully you will find useful. So we've prepared a short presentation for you today covering a few things, and we've tried to make it as short and concise as possible, and hopefully you will find it palatable and useful. So we'll start with a few presentations, just so you get to know us a bit better, who we are, where we come from, and why we are here today sharing all of this with you. And we will continue with sharing a few things or a few arguments to try and convince you that, or to try and make a compelling case as to why we should be giving waste management more consideration at design stage. And then we will move on to the main part of this presentation, which is 5 key design considerations for efficient waste management in buildings. Moving on and starting with some introductions. So this is me, I'm Jose Sorribes. I am a waste management and logistics specialist. I'm currently working at Buro Happold as an associate director. And to share a little bit about myself, so I'm absolutely passionate about solid waste management, in particular about waste management operations and anything that has to do with building design, and also process optimization when it comes to improving or enhancing any processes where waste is managed. I've been working in consultancy as a consultant for more than 11 years, and I've delivered projects both in the UK and overseas, and I've worked with clients both in the private sector and the public sector. And I guess if I had to mention my main areas of expertise, I would say one of them is, without a doubt, developing waste management strategies and implementing these strategies during the design stages of a building or a master plan. I've also developed a specialism in some complex buildings, or what I would call a complex building. Buildings like hospitals, airports, and stadiums are buildings that, from a waste management perspective, are quite challenging. So I've worked on a number of these, and I've developed a bit of a specialism on these buildings. So that's me, and I'm going to pass on to my colleague, Naomi.
Hi, everyone. My name's Nyomi Rowsell. Yeah, I was previously trained as an architect, and now I've developed kind of hands-on experience as a waste project officer. My present role is as a consultant, which I've been doing for a few years now. So as I developed kind of my master's in applied design, so I specialized in community participation and sustainable construction materials. I've got a really kind of passion for circular integrated design. I the principles in my life. Like I've got chickens and they produce eggs and fertilizer to feed the vegetable garden. Yeah, I lived in Malawi in East Africa for 6 years, where I developed international conservation and cleanup management. I founded this social enterprise, which now kind of today have a local team that operate independently. They've got income generating activities from waste management. So there's a huge amount of environmental, social and economic impact. And I've also had job roles in the, I've worked with the Surrey County Council Environment Partnership team. So I helped underperforming areas, so specifically flats, like really working hard to improve recycling quality and expand the food waste collection programs. So now as a waste consultant at Buro Happold, I develop operational and construction waste strategies for international clients and obviously the UK. I'm particularly interested in like London policies and opportunities around circular economy and how this is all expanding at the moment. Yeah, thanks everyone. Hopefully this is interesting.
Right, so we thought it would be a good idea to start by showing you this. So this is a small sample of pictures we've collected over the years from our site visits and different places. And these pictures basically show what might happen if waste management is not considered properly during the design stages of a building. So this is basically the consequence of poor waste management design. And I know that some of you might be thinking right now, right, so is this due to poor design or is it due to poor human behavior? So I think that question is quite valid, and I acknowledge that there is always a behavioral component in all of these situations. However, in my experience, I've come to realize that adequate design is fundamental to drive good behavior when it comes to waste management. And I think my colleague Naomi has also some insights to share in this regard.
Yeah, so as you said, Jose, you know, like behavior breeds behavior. If someone leaves some bulky waste on the side of the road, like there's a high chance that someone else is going to do the same. But in the world of waste, where people are sharing bins, there's multiple dwellings, there's a lot of challenges, problems can like escalate very quickly. So yeah, and if a bin has incorrect items, like the bin crews can refuse collection. So that then causes one problem. Several bins on the floor, it's highly likely that other residents are just going to throw the waste into the pile rather than trying to reach a bin. So yeah, this can be caused by simple problems like a light switch or the light not working. Once the space is uninviting or unsafe, the residents are less likely to enter the bin store. So managing multiple stakeholders presents a significant challenge. Like so, we've got kind of council, waste officers, bin collection crews, developers and building managers, and actually like it's essential that everyone works together to drive this kind of appropriate design and then create messages for appropriate behavior and usage.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people in the audience will be familiar with these situations. They've probably experienced these firsthand, either through their personal lives or through their work. And what we are trying to do here today is try to, I guess, share a few ideas or a few considerations that will hopefully help them or help other people prevent these situations. So moving on to the next section, we've called this section "Prevention is better than cure," and this is a quote that is often used in a healthcare environment, but it's a quote that I personally like a lot because I think it's quite relevant to the topic in question as well. I think this whole idea of preventing something before it becomes an issue holds true when it comes to waste management in buildings. So giving waste management proper consideration at design stage, I firmly believe it's fundamental to prevent issues or challenges or inefficiencies that will happen at operational stage when the building is up and running. And so what we have in the next section is we've tried to compile a few arguments to show how this ethos or this philosophy of designing buildings for efficient waste management can benefit the different stakeholders. So we're talking local authorities, developers, residents, etc. So hopefully that will provide compelling enough argument to consider waste management in buildings at design stage. So I'm going to start with local authorities. So how do local authorities benefit from giving waste management proper consideration at design stage? So we have a few things here which I think are interesting. So the first one is compliance with current waste collection services. So we've seen in a number of cases in the past that failing to design the waste facilities in a building properly result in the building not being able to provide the waste systems that this local authority requires according to their standards. So that's one key benefit that they have to gain. Second one is making the waste management in that particular building adaptable to future policies. So that's particularly relevant now with things like simpler recycling coming into play. So there are going to be changes to the segregation of materials and the way they are collected. So considering waste at these design stages is fundamental to be able that these policies can be, or these practices can be provided. I've got higher capture rates, and this goes back to behavior as well. So if we provide proper design, proper spaces for waste management, that's going to, in my experience, that's going to drive better behavior, which is going to result in higher capture rates for things like recyclables, organic material, and in turn, this will help local authorities reduce collection costs and reduce carbon emissions. Then we've got more efficient collections. So if we design buildings in the proper way, the removal of waste from these buildings should be seamless. And so that will help collection crews provide a more efficient service. And in turn, that will, again, help local authorities reduce collection costs and reduce carbon emissions. And then the last one that I wanted to mention is that designing for adequate waste management results in safer, less strained operations, which is particularly important nowadays.
So developers can benefit from taking ownership of a well-designed space with appropriate spacing, working lights, good ventilation, a clean space. People are attracted to enter the space and treat it with care. When promoting waste reduction, reuse, and sharing systems in the building, then less space is needed in the central waste store. This means there can be more space for other important services in the building, like mechanical equipment. I'm sure architects will resonate with this. So a well-designed store, both functionally and spatially, creates a ripple effect of efficiency. So systems can operate more smoothly. Service charges can even decrease as there are fewer emergency collections, and safety issues are then minimized. So the proactive approach saves significant time and energy compared to constantly reacting to problems.
Right. So, and then next group of stakeholders will be residents. So how do residents benefit from all of this? So the obvious one is that by designing buildings for efficient waste management, we are creating basically a better place to live. We're generating safer environments, less polluted environments. places where there is less risk, the less presence of vehicles or heavy refuse vehicles and things like that, and enhanced aesthetics. So all of these increases the quality of living in that particular place. And then another one that I've seen is that when things are designed in the proper way, residents obviously are more prone to do the right thing, or more compelled, or I guess driven to behave in the right way when it comes to waste management. And this leads to better participation and compliance with the waste policies and the waste procedures. And that creates a sense of community, or a higher sense of community. If you see that your neighbors are doing the right thing and everybody else is doing the right thing, that kind of strengthens this sensation of being part of a community.
So for building managers, for a well-designed and appropriate sized store with adequate bins and clear signage, and even like the addition of plants can create like this beautiful kind of self-sustaining space where people treat waste as more like a resource that is managed. And yeah, it means that building managers have less work to do. And yeah, there's like, a lot more efficiency and therefore much better well-being for staff.
Great. So hopefully we've given you a few reasons, a few good reasons as to why considering waste management during the design stages of a building is important and fundamental. And now, hopefully you are convinced, hopefully you are all on board and you are ready to hear how we can do that. So we're going to share with you a few design considerations and that we've gathered for you. So these are based on our experience, obviously, of multiple years working with clients and other designers. And it's not an exhaustive list, but hopefully this will give you something or some fundamental considerations to work with. First key design consideration is in relation to waste composition, segregation, and forecasting. So it's an obvious fact that the building will generate waste. So once the building is up and running, you will have residents living in there. You will have tenants running some businesses. You will have retail units, and all of these uses will generate waste. So that's something that to this day is not avoidable. So it's fundamental to do an exercise of trying to predict how much waste will be generated. So it's what we call a waste generation analysis or modeling. So, and not only do we have to predict or try to predict as accurately as possible how much waste will be generated, we also have to try and predict what types of materials will be generated from these activities. So that's waste composition and waste quantities. And again, the way to do that is by undertaking some waste analysis, waste generation analysis or modeling. That's a fundamental part of designing buildings for efficient waste management. And it's a point or a step that is not always given proper thought and consideration. So a few tips in terms of how to make sure that your modeling is accurate and on point. So the first one is to, whenever possible, try to avoid relying on old waste generation metrics. So waste management or waste generation is evolving all the time. I mean, we see different trends, and but we can see, looking at the stats, that we are not generating the same amounts of waste that we were generating 10 years ago or 5 years ago. the composition is changing as well. That's all driven by the way we live and how life changes, or how habits of life and consumption change. So I think it's good practice to try and avoid relying on metrics that are kind of obsolete or out of date whenever possible. Another important point, and that's something I've learned over the years, is, and this is especially relevant if we are working on residential buildings, is to work with the environmental officers and waste officers in the local authorities to try and agree on realistic, up-to-date waste generation metrics. So almost all local authorities in the UK have their guidance and policies and standards which provide waste generation metrics. Sometimes these metrics are up to date, sometimes these metrics are not. So it's always good to engage with them and work with them to try and agree on a generation rate or metric that reflects with certain degree of reality the amount of waste that will be produced in this particular building. Another important one is to consider future trends and fluctuations in generation. So, and again, that's trying to observe how, or trying to predict how habits will change over time, where we will be in a few years' time. Because one thing to note is when we are designing a building, so that building might not be up and running until 5-6 years down the line. And by that time, things might have changed. And this building will continue to be up and running for hopefully for many years. And again, what we design today needs to be able to cope with what will happen in 10 years, 20 years down the line. So it's trying to, none of us have a crystal ball, that's for sure, but it's trying to predict as much as we can what will happen in the future, and trying to design for that, trying to ensure that your designs are flexible to accommodate that. And then the last one is to, in relation to the former actually, important to future-proof the designs, but more from the point of view of policies and practices. So, and again, it's worth mentioning the simpler recycling regulations. So if you're aware that there are certain policies or legislation that will come into place or will be enforced in the future, it's key to design for that, even if that particular legislation is not being has not been implemented at the minute. So yeah, these are the main things as far as waste composition, segregation, and forecast. And now moving on to the second key design consideration. So that's waste flow. So waste flow is basically looking at or thinking about how the waste materials will move through the building. So from the point of generation to the waste storage area or storage room, or the point of storage. And again, that's something that is often kind of neglected in some, or not given proper thought in some designs. And I mean, this is a really broad topic, but in summary, there are three, when it comes to residential waste, there are three main systems to move waste from the residence apartments to the waste storage area. So the first one is waste is carried by residents. They are doing the transportation of waste. The second one is using some form of vertical conveyance, like waste chute systems. And third one is having what we call a valet service, which is having a porter team or a valet team that does the transportation and movement on behalf of residents. So a few design considerations for each of these different systems. So the first one, which is probably the most common one, is the one I've seen the most in buildings, because it's easy, straightforward, it's low cost, which is waste is simply taken to the waste facilities or the waste room by residents. So the design considerations that I would highlight here are, first one, look at the horizontal carrying distances from the apartments to the waste storage rooms. So we have we have the British standards and the building regulations, which in the UK stipulate that these carrying distances should be less than 30 meters. And that's all driven by trying to make the task as convenient as possible for residents, because convenience drives or makes, drives or incentivizes good behavior in that sense. So I think that's important. It's important to try and meet these criteria whenever possible. Second one is, and this is one that I think is fundamental, and again, it's often missed, is avoid creating a path of less resistance for some waste streams. And what I mean by that is, because I've seen some schemes in the past where you might have different systems for different transportation systems for different waste streams. So you might have a waste chute system for general waste and a carry by resident system for recyclables. So that's problematic because that basically creates a path of less resistance for some waste streams and makes it more demanding in terms of effort for other waste streams. So that's going to drive inevitably or it's going to motivate residents to take the path of less resistance for all the waste streams, and it's going to result in recyclables going to the general waste stream and vice versa. So try to avoid that as much as possible. And another one is ensure that the routes to the waste storage areas are part of the natural routes that residents will take to things like the car park or spaces like the car park or the bike store. I think that facilitates and again motivates residents to do the right thing and makes it more convenient or enhances conveniency. And then the final one, which is probably obvious for most of you, is make sure that these routes are free of stairs, steep ramps, and things like that that will make it difficult for some users to navigate. Then we have the second system, which is waste chutes. And I mean, waste chutes, we can have a whole presentation on waste chutes, but I've just focused here on a few key things when it comes to waste chutes. So first one is obviously they need inlet rooms on every floor, because the main purpose of waste chutes is to create some convenience for residents. So you need to incorporate inlet rooms on every floor. And as a minimum, you're going to need space for 2 or 3 inlets and chutes if you use by separators and things like that. So, and the number of chutes is driven by the number of materials that you need to segregate. So that's important. And another consideration is thinking about the discharge rooms at ground floor or basement level. So these are the rooms where the chutes discharge. So in these rooms, containers are going to be swapped. The containers that sit underneath the chute are going to be swapped regularly. So make sure that you have enough space for this rotation of containers and movement of containers. And then the third one is that we need to provide alternative disposal and movement systems for some of the materials that might not be tolerated by the chute. And the most popular one is these big cardboard boxes, Amazon boxes and things like that, which are problematic. And if we put them down the chute, they will block the chute. So it's good to have a different system for these materials, as convenient as the chute. It has to be as convenient as the chute to avoid this path of less resistance that I mentioned before. And then the final one is the valet service. And this is where you have, as I said before, you have a porter team or a facilities management team doing the movement on behalf of the residents. So a few key things are make sure they have service lifts to perform this movement of waste and to avoid interfering with residents' lifts. and consider how the handover of waste is done. This is important. So how are they going to collect the waste from the apartments? Are they going to be knocking on every single apartment door and then picking it up apartment by apartment, or do we need some intermediate waste rooms on every floor where residents can deposit the waste and the handover is done in there? And if we go with these intermediate waste stores, then these need to be incorporated in the design. I'm given proper consideration in terms of location, space, etc., ventilation, lighting, fire protection. And the final one is, where possible, provide back-of-house routes for the movement of this waste to hide that from residents as much as possible. And now I'm going to hand over to Nyomi, who's going to cover waste storage.
Oh yeah, so Jose's already mentioned this very poignant word, like we must design for convenience. So is the waste store better located internally or externally? So really like working out what spacing is available, and then ensuring the carry distance of less than 30 meters. So there could be like one internal central main waste store, or interim stores which go nearer to the residents. But then if you have interim stores, then the FM team will need to move all the waste to this central store. Alternatively, external stores offer another solution. Though selecting the right type of external store is crucial, as they are open in the public space, so they are generally more vulnerable to being misused. So to improve recycling quality, positioning the bins is actually key. So you can position the recycling bins furthest away in the bin store. This reduces contamination, as residents making this extra effort typically show greater commitment to proper sorting. So bin sizing must match daily waste generation rates and spatial constraints. So effective waste store design requires collaboration with an architect to optimize both sizing and layout for maximum operational efficiency. Essential design features include double doors, 15 centimeters on either side of the bin, allows for kind of good bin maneuvering, as that's obviously a key part for collections. And then we've also got positioning of bins or waste stores to be 10 to 15 meters just within distance for the collection points for the crews as well. So this distance will be stated in the specific council guidelines, depending where the building is. So in space constrained areas, we've got waste compaction equipment that can reduce the volume and collection frequency. So improving overall efficiency, and this includes compactors, cardboard balers, glass crushers, obviously depending on the waste streams that are produced. So all waste stores require proper ventilation, lighting, drainage, and clear signage. So for problematic locations, aperture lids and secure locking systems prevent unauthorized access and misuse by non-compliant residents. There's always going to be a few, and the problems will escalate. So it may also be worth sharing a poster in the waste store, providing kind of the contacts and the responsibilities of the different stakeholders, as I mentioned before. So, council, bin crews, what the responsibilities are, so that residents are empowered to act when there is an issue to get it resolved before escalation occurs. This is the evaluation. It's important to evaluate and implement the most efficient waste systems. So we can consider multiple options. Bin housing is a secure steel structure designed to enclose bins. It's accessible to the public, but each block shares clearly marked containers for each waste stream. Aperture lids can control the waste going into the bin. They are smarter than the usual bins. They're also fire resistant, aesthetically smarter. The bin enclosures and sheds also work well. These need to be fully secure, so they need a roof, a good lock, to refrain residents from mistreating it. And there's also, like public bins in public areas are often kind of targeted or used by blocks down the road or anyone kind of passing. So yeah, it's really important to design to ensure that this doesn't happen as best as possible. Then we've got like underground refuse systems. So underground bins cut down on large deliberate contamination, like the dumping of black bin bags and bulky waste. Residents still put items in the wrong bin, but it is the building manager's responsibility to share that information. Like when there are new residents, they should share like welcome packs with the information about what items go in the recycling bins and what items don't. Larger bins, the underground bins are larger, and therefore the collection frequency is less. So this means that proportionally the recycling contamination may build up, but this is things like thin plastics that people don't understand are not recyclable for now. So yeah, side loading containers are also another option, located in public areas. These are well used in Europe, as I think the culture is slowly changing in the UK. So yeah, it's important to suggest this as an option. So bulky waste presents multiple challenges. We've got fire hazards, deterioration when left outside. We've got obstruction of regular waste systems. So how can this all be managed? Effective management starts with education. Display posters highlighting like reuse options, the local recycling centres. The challenges often faced in flats is that people don't have a car, especially in London. So another option is to suggest kind of car sharing. Online marketplaces are also another option that should be shared. And this would mean that the residents can actually like gain money. So hopefully that will be an incentive to do that. So when prevention fails, we've got dedicated storage becomes crucial. So partition bulky waste areas separately from regular bins to avoid normalizing inappropriate dumping. This is really important for external stores. Like again, like as I mentioned, like as soon as one person does it, another person will come and do it. So yeah, it's important that the housing managers are very efficient and kind of remove that bulky waste and separate it. So managing non-compliant residents requires both carrot and stick approaches for messaging. So after positive engagement fails, really work through to make clear consequences. So for example, there was a great example about putting crime tape around inappropriately dumped items, combined with like investigation notices, threats of fines, so that when people understand that this is wrong and people are acting on it, then they're less inclined to do it themselves. For areas with persistent problems, we then have kind of the more structured solutions, which is like partnerships between the different stakeholders. So maybe like the council and the building managers can team up and have like monthly collection days of bulky items, or perhaps want to promote like reuse events like car boot sales in an appropriate kind of local outdoor space. So this encourages residents to again kind of sell the items, keep them of value and sell them, and hopefully that will be a good incentive to act appropriately. So service yards are high activity zones, so careful planning for safe vehicle manoeuvring is crucial. With a simpler recycling policy, expanding waste streams, there may be multiple collection vehicles that need coordination and kind of access, and different size vehicles create different spacing. So it's really preferred, or the preferred option would be to have a service yard like within the building to ensure that this is all in a controlled space, to minimize also like the street level logistics and scheduling conflicts. So design considerations include accommodating multiple waste streams and varied collection vehicles based on council fleet specifications. So ensuring adequate space, and then also incorporating equipment like compactors. We've got these lifting mechanisms, we've got space for that, we've got health and safety compliance, depending on what kind of compactors it is, and then also providing space for operational tools such as roll cages and like waste trolleys, etc. And then essential infrastructure includes water systems and drainage for cleaning, plus lighting and ventilation for safe, efficient operations. So for on-street solutions, it's important to provide sufficient lay-by capacity for collection vehicles, while ensuring clear obstacle-free routes with appropriate access features like drop curbs, so the bin crews don't struggle. Consider bin presentation rooms. So if there is a waste store that exceeds the 15 or 10 to 15 meter distance for the bin crews, is perhaps a better option is to design a bin presentation space so that the FM team, the building managers team, will then move the bins to this bin presentation area on the day of collection, ready for the crews.
Yeah, just to emphasize on the point on the bin presentation rooms. So that's something that we've seen over and over in schemes as well, and projects we've worked on, where because of the geometry of the building or the way the architectural concepts are laid out, the waste storage areas are kind of located away from the point of collection, or from the carriageway, or from the facade of the building. Sometimes they are at basement levels and without access, so basement levels which do not have or do not provide access for refuse vehicles. So having this bin presentation room or bin presentation area is fundamental, because without this, the crews would need to wheel bins over extremely long distances, and that's most of the time that's an issue from a planning perspective as well. So local authorities would object, would not accept this, because obviously that would put more strain on their crews, and it would significantly increase collection times and compromise the service. So yeah, that's a very important one when it comes to residential waste. Yeah, and another point that I wanted to emphasize here is, so when it comes to off-street facilities, so namely service yards and loading bays, it's fundamental that the space is designed for adequate vehicle turning, vehicle maneuvering, and that requires a swept path analysis, which is basically, most of you are probably familiar with this, but that's basically running some tests to see if the waste vehicles can maneuver in the area, can access easily and safely the collection points. So that's also a fundamental part of this, of designing these facilities in buildings. Yeah, just the final consideration is about technologies, or different technologies, or thinking about different technologies and innovation. So sometimes it's not possible to be innovative. Sometimes it's or sometimes there is no need to be innovative. It's just some buildings are relatively, or they are not complex, and they can be, an efficient waste management system can be developed and created with traditional systems or traditional approaches. But it's always good to consider these technologies, because they can benefit they can enhance or increase the efficiency of the waste strategy, and in turn they can enhance or facilitate the design. So I have a list of a few here. I mean, this is not a comprehensive list by any means, but these are some of the technologies that exist, proven technologies that exist in terms of waste management and can be considered during design. So the first one is the volume reduction equipment, things like bin compactors, portable compactors, or cardboard balers, glass crushers. So most of you are familiar with this equipment. So bin compactors, bin presses, basically reduce the volume of the waste within the bin, increasing the bin capacity. So this can reduce the number of bins that you need in a waste room, and therefore reducing potentially reducing the space that you need in the bin room. However, we need to be careful when using this or when designing for this machinery, because we might run the risk of increasing the weight of the bin to levels which might pose some issues to the staff that will be moving these bins. So we need to factor that into our analysis. And then portable compactors are quite an effective solution. A lot of schemes use portable compactors, and they can reduce the volume significantly and reduce the need for storage somewhere else. But again, these machines, they need space, they need to be placed in a loading bay, and they need their own consideration. And then we have cardboard balers, which are more effective in commercial buildings or commercial operations where you have a lot of cardboard being produced, because what you produce with them is bales, and bales need to be collected in a different way compared to regular bins. Then we have vacuum waste collection systems, which is a system that it's quite popular in Europe, in my native Spain. It's quite popular, and in Scandinavia as well. It's less popular in the UK. I think it's gaining a bit of momentum, but it's less popular. And it's basically a system that automates the conveyance of waste from the point of generation to the point of storage, and also automates the bulking. So it's basically turning waste management into a utility, or kind of like a utility. And again, most of you are probably familiar with these systems, how they work. But they've been implemented in a couple of schemes in the UK, large residential schemes in the UK. Then we have other things like RFID-enabled bins. So RFID technology is being used in some cities in the UK. It's used in other parts of Europe. And it basically has a number of benefits in terms of monitoring or collecting data, and it's an interesting technology to consider in some instances. Then bin fill sensors. These are widely popular in the UK, I think, and there are a lot of suppliers out there. And bin fill sensors can be used in many different settings. It can be used, or it can be effective as well in buildings where you have waste management or waste managed by an FM team, because they can facilitate or they can help monitor bins or the fill levels of the bins, and then support the bin swapping or bin movement or bin emptying operations. Then we have a system that is called identification ID systems for bins. This is widely used in Spain and in some other parts of Europe as well. I don't think it's being used in the UK that much, not that I've seen of. And it has some potential, but it's basically, the idea is basically to have the bins locked and then only accessible by means of a sensor, and residents will need an ID card to be able to open the bin. So the whole idea here is that whenever you are using the bin, that opening of the bin or usage of the bin is registered or linked to a user or to a resident. And that opens up the door for things like pay as you throw and other charging systems. But also it's interesting because in Spain they've been using this system, and some of the early reports say that if it has motivated some good behavior. So just because of the fact that people had to identify themselves to use the bin, they've been more inclined to do the right thing and reduce contamination and dispose of the materials, the right materials in the right bin. And, it's kind of driven or motivated this good behavior, which is positive. And then I've also mentioned digital reward systems, which are being used in the UK as well, which can help drive this behavior, this good behavior, by providing an incentive in the form of a reward to those who do the right thing. Then there's a new technology which it's still early days for this technology, but it's promising, which is AI-assisted bin sorters. So the idea here is to remove the decision of disposing the material in the right bin from humans. So it's basically letting the AI make that decision for us, with the view that the AI will be able to make a better choice than we as humans would, or a more responsible choice, I suppose. And these are still not fully rolled out. I think they are a few trials in a few commercial buildings, but not fully rolled out, and not as popular as other technologies. And then the last one I would mention is organic waste treatment, which again is something that you are all familiar with. Things like in-vessel composting, small-scale anaerobic digestion, things like that. So, and again, more suitable for commercial buildings where there is a catering operation or some commercial activity that produces high quantities of food waste or organic waste. And and the reason why I mention all of these technologies is because all of them, or most of them, require some for them to be effective and to be able to be implemented, they need to be considered at design stage, because all of them need some sort of infrastructure, whether it's digital or whether it's space, but all of them need some infrastructure to be able to operate in the right way. So I think that's taken us to the end of this presentation, and this is all that we wanted to share with you. So I think I will stop here, and hopefully you've enjoyed the presentation. Hopefully everything made sense and provided some value to you, and we are now happy to take any questions or have any discussions on this or anything else.
Fantastic, Jose. It's a really thorough and insightful presentation. Thank you very much. Would you point us in the direction of any data around the waste metrics other than the British standard 5906? Because this is quite an evolving position for local authorities and designers, and I think we're all sort of feeling our way a bit. Can you add any sort of additional information around that at all, please?
Yeah, so I mean, it really I think the best sources of data for me personally are any composition analysis or surveys or studies that have been done by other organizations or other professionals. And I usually look into the scientific literature to see what there is in there. But sometimes you find a lot of really good data outside of the scientific literature. So, for instance, I'm gonna name some of the studies that were recently done in London by an organization called Re-London. So they've done some compositional analysis on many flats in many council estates in London, and I think that data is gold. So I think for me that's the best data because it's current, it's accurate, and it's reflective of what's happening in the in buildings nowadays. So that's my in terms of data quality, that would be my that would be at the top for me. So trying to look for any composition analysis published in the peer-reviewed literature or done by some organizations that are actually looking into this. And then besides that, you have other government publications or government data that is really is robust and is solid. But it's more current or more recent than British standards. I mean, the issue I have with British standards is that it was done in 2005. So, and a lot has happened since then.
That's good. And Shelley has kindly put a link in the chat to some of the Re-London information. So thank you for that, Shelley. Another question around in-bin compactors and the concern over weight potentially. Is that something you've come across? I suppose any form of compaction actually. How do you ensure that it doesn't become too heavy?
Yeah, so we always try to. So we've come across that in the many years ago. We came across a couple of. We had a couple of commercial. We did some surveys in some commercial buildings, and they had some issues with the collection crews had some issues with the bin weights. I think it was more in relation to the general waste bins as opposed to the recyclable bins, because the recyclable bins the material is low density, so you can compact them to a higher degree and still maintain the weight under, within tolerable limits. I think they had some issues with the general waste, and what we tend to do now is when we are designing buildings and we implement bin presses, we always do a calculation to ensure that the weight of the bin does not exceed certain limits to ensure that the crews don't have any issues with moving the bins. So we have our own kind of criteria. We say, okay, this is the weight limit that the payload that we want to establish as the as the limit, and then we make sure that we don't compact the waste more than that, and that obviously reduces the efficacy of the bin press, but for a good reason.
Yeah, that's helpful. Is there a maximum weight that you sort of allow in a 1100 litre bin, or?
Yeah, so we would normally target something around 250 kilos payload for an 1100, which some people might say that's too low. Some people might say that's too high. I mean, I've heard it all. I think that's a kind of safe payload for somebody who's moving the bin.
Yeah, that's interesting. We've got. I was interested in your reference to underground systems. We've got a question around whether I suppose it really is really availability of infrastructure for servicing probably is the limiting factor. Is it? Are you seeing that increase at all from your perspective?
So you mean what's the limitation in terms of implementing these systems? Is that the question?
It's my observation has been that there are constraints around underground service, mostly because of availability of vehicles for emptying.
Oh, yeah.
And really, as a general question, are you seeing that change very much from where you're sitting? Is it becoming more widely available?
Yes, so you're correct. So in our experience, we've seen the same. So when it comes to residential waste, the limitation is the vehicles. So not all local authorities have the crane vehicle that is required to collect these underground bin systems. So if they don't have the vehicle in the fleet, they can't provide the service. So that means that you cannot design for underground bins. Having said that, we are seeing that more local authorities, especially in London, are now incorporating these vehicles in their fleets, and because they are keen to provide the service and they are keen for developers and designers to rely on their underground systems. And there are a few local authorities that I've worked with which have now underground systems in their policies and in their standards, because they've got the trucks and they want to obviously utilize the trucks and make use of the trucks. And then another situation that some developers have encountered sometimes is where there is we've seen that on some projects where there was a need or a benefit, a clear benefit for the developer and the design team with having these systems, but the local authority didn't have the trucks or the vehicles to collect them. We've been able to negotiate with the local authority and provide or basically finance the purchase of a vehicle for them, so we could use the system, and with a view that by implementing the system there will be a return on investment and the scheme or the design or the building will benefit.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Cherry, please.
I've got a question. It's a architect background with a high-rise building in Birmingham. So this is a very interesting presentation for us, because we have a situation where we've got 700 apartments in the city of Birmingham, right in the middle, with very little bin spaces allowed for. It's interesting to look at like compactor and quality of how it's recycled rather than the number of bins, which is currently our challenge. Is we don't have enough space for the number of bins in it, because the waste management plan was done in a very traditional way where it's X liter per apartment, and then then you result in X number of bins, but there is no quality of recycling in the design of the waste management. It's very interesting to look at a bin chute system, which we will probably end up having to provide, and also the compactor. It's good to understand. I think the bit that I don't quite understand is, if you were to provide the quality, can you then advice on what space saving could be? Could we have? As in, if you provide a compactor, does it mean that you have less bin spaces? You can have less bin spaces. It's just that kind of formula of like, how does that quality then present itself in sort of the space planning sort of challenge that we're facing? So that, could you expand a bit on that?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, using some rough numbers, one compactor, 10 cubic meter portable compactor is equivalent to 1,100 bins.
Oh,
so
okay.
It has the capacity, roughly the capacity of 1,100 liter bins. So what you are achieving with a compactor of that size is you are reducing the space for that number of bins. That's not to say that you don't need any bins at all, because you will still need bins for residents. If it's a chute system or a resident carry system, you will still need bins for residents to dispose of waste. However, you don't need bins for a whole week worth of waste, or for 2 weeks, or depending on the collection frequency. You just need bins for a day or 2 days worth of waste, because I'm assuming that you will have a facilities management team or a porter team that will empty the bins regularly into the compactor. So it really comes down to how frequent you are emptying these bins into the
based
compactor.
on the 2 weeks collection period. And it's interesting to understand that, you know, by having a compactor, we can save a lot of space then to provide a better quality spaces, because by not having a compactor or any quality in this waste management, our bin store were just filled with bins currently, and there's no space to move. So it's actually very useful to understand the 1100 bins per compactor is actually quite a substantial number in terms of space saving. Is that, obviously we need to look at it a bit more detail. Is there like a table or something in a standard document that you look at to kind of push the quality in design standard, like things like 1100 bins per compactor? Does it sit anywhere in the realm of I don't know, recommended documents that we can kind of suggest that maybe we kind of look at it in a different angle other than, you know, X number of bins? That's kind of what we're getting at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few, I mean, that's all in here. So that's the document. But
Give you an email address, though.
I will be in contact, I think.
Yeah, I could point you to some. I mean, we can speak later, and I can point you to some guidance. But I think most of our knowledge has been acquired over 10 years of experience working on, you know, designing buildings. Mm-hmm. So, and understanding the systems and looking at how the systems work, and, you know, having many issues with these systems as well. So I think, although there is some guidance that I can point you to, I think it's always best to, you know, to speak with somebody who knows what they are.
Project-based kind of.
Yeah, it's exactly. Mm. So, but yeah, I mean, you're right. So I think compaction is a good option, and for a building like the one you are describing, I think it's the most sensible option, because otherwise you're going to end up with 50, 60 bins in a bin room, and that's not good. It's not good for your, you know, for your scheme, because you are going to need a massive amount of space, which, you know, you don't want to spend on or utilize on waste storage. And it's not good for the local authority either, because, you know, they are going to have to collect 60 bins in one go, and that's not, you know, they are going that's going to put a ton of pressure on their collection system. So I think compaction is really the most sensible option when it comes to these high-rise, you know, really, really big schemes.
Yeah, thank you. That's useful.
No problem.
Great. And there's some interesting bits in the chat about if you're providing storage for 2 whole weeks. You know, that starts to present other issues in terms of odor and that sort of thing. And like you've rightly said, looking at your collection frequency as well and reducing that, obviously can have a lot of other advantages as well. Also, a question about the sorting chutes, trash sorters. Have you any experience with them at all? I've had quite a lot of not so good experience, but what's your view on that?
Yeah, no, we've done a ton of work on chutes. We've designed a lot of, we are not so we work with chute suppliers who will do the final design. But what we tend to do with chutes is when we recommend the chute system in a scheme, we do the preliminary kind of space planning. So making sure that the scheme or the designs have sufficient space for the shaft, you know, the shaft and the inlet rooms, and because we have enough experience and enough knowledge to understand what's required from a design perspective. So we work with the architects during the early stages of design to make sure they have the space before the chute supplier comes on board and they do the final design. So in terms of chutes, yeah, it's an interesting topic. I always have mixed feelings about chutes, to be honest. So I think chutes are great to generate or to create convenience, and I think that's the main benefit of chutes. They make it convenient for residents to dispose of waste. They don't have to, They don't have to walk over long distances or enter a waste room, which can be quite daunting. It's always daunting to enter a room full of bins and full of waste and with smells and so on. So I think in that sense, I think they are a good system. But having said that, and based on my experience, they present a number of challenges, quite a few challenges. So it's important to speak with somebody who knows how to design buildings for waste chutes, because these challenges can be kind of minimized or addressed at design stage, most of them, if they are known and predicted. But yeah, it's again, it's all about having the knowledge, having the experience, and having a good understanding of how chute systems operate, what they can do, what they cannot do. And if a chute system is the best system for that building, okay, so how we can mitigate all of these limitations. Sometimes a chute system is not the best system for the building. But again, that needs to be thought through.
Yep, good. Well, we're sort of running out of time a little bit. Well, quite a lot actually, but that's been really helpful and really valuable information there. We haven't quite mopped up all the questions, but we'll try and answer them in the chat.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, if somebody has any more questions, like they can find us, Nyomi and I, are on LinkedIn. You can find us, you can connect with us, and then ask any questions. Yeah, happy to help.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Jose, Naomi, really appreciate all your input into the session. Thank you very much for that. Huge thanks as well for everyone who's joined in the interaction there. I hope you've found some valuable stuff you could take away, and we're looking forward to the next sessions, more sessions. Always running more of these. You've got ideas, things that you'd like us to bring some knowledge to the table, bring some experience from third parties like Jose and Naomi. I'm sure they'd be keen to do this again, expand on some of those subjects. So with that, thanks everyone. Have a fantastic day, and speak again soon.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you for
you.
inviting us.
Thank
This is great.